Hi, welcome to the Sew Along 2020 with GourmetQuilter. I'm Susan Clare, the GourmetQuilter. We're doing a wonderful sew along with an Australian theme this time. We're having a lot of fun. We've got some very delicious fabrics by Nutex, who've got some wonderful Australian designs going, and we're doing some Australian applique as well. So we're actually on to part 11, so we're well into the quilt now. We've got a whole stack of blocks that we've already made. And if you've signed up on GourmetQuilter.com for the pattern, you'll have something to print out, something a bit like this. So what we're doing this time is an applique koala block, and there's one behind me here. He's a little bit incognito. He didn't really want to stand out too much. He said he wanted to hide in the tree, which he's doing quite successfully. So because we're making two, we're making one block in one direction and one facing the other way. So the pattern will come with it going in both directions, ready for tracing. For the applique, we're doing fused applique. So I'm just going to show you this time, we've kind of gone through all the applique stitching and things like that, so we know how to do that, and we know how to position it in general too. But I thought I'd go through the positioning this time because with the little koala here, he's got a little head which sits on top of his arm, and that sits on top of his body and the tree branch, and this arm here comes out, his little tummy is sitting around behind the tree branch there. He's got another little foot hanging in there, but this arm comes from behind the tummy because it would come from behind there, but it's coming around onto the branch. So we've got to kind of do the under and over thing. So I thought if I did the positioning, that might be helpful this time. So I've got all my pieces cut out here. I have not positioned any of them yet. So on the pattern, the pieces are numbered in generally the order that you might position them in. And I have got the little arm that's got to do its under and over as piece number 1. But in actual fact, you probably wouldn't put it down first, but it does need to go under everything else. So I quite like to position everything with the tree. Now the tree can come over a little bit as it is in the picture, but I think it's quite nice to sort of centre it a little bit more, and if it overlaps into that little triangle, I think that's absolutely fine. So I'm just lightly positioning that, and then we need to position his little, the little tummy so that it's behind the body, and the tummy sits out to one side, and we want that behind the branch in general. So we can lift that up now that we know where it's going, and just pop it in there so that he's got a little tummy sticking out that way, and he's obviously sort of sitting in the tree that way. And then we've got this little arm here that's hanging around up there, and we want to now lift that little tummy, pop the little arm behind the tummy there, but we want to have it come up next to the branch, but so that the little hand sits right on the branch because he's hanging on to that, because that's what they do. Other than that, I think everything else is fairly straightforward, but I just thought it would help. Sometimes we've got to position things just so that they suit. So he's got a little foot that hangs on down here. He's got another little hind leg that's hanging on around about here somewhere, I think. It's sitting in there over the branch. This one may come up a touch. And then he's got another arm up here, because we have 2 arms and 2 legs. And so this one here is sort of sitting above the body, but that hand is below this one coming up here. It may even want to come down just a touch more and around a little bit. And then the head sits on top. So if you've marked your eyes and nose on the face, it's a good idea to do a light pencil mark while the pattern piece is still in place, so that you can see where to put them. And then this piece comes on here. Now this one here kind of sits up close. They're quite sort of snuggling into a little branch. So I think it's probably a little bit hard to see because I've used fabrics of a similar colour, and I have to say koalas are not generally blue or with wattle all over them. But I think it's quite cute to use some of these fabrics, and when I do the applique stitching with a dark grey thread, that will help highlight that. So I can iron all that in place now. Now I haven't cut out my eyes and my nose. I'm going to probably applique those, or I might do them with pen. So we have a couple of choices on things like that. So I can actually iron all that now. That's already and I can start doing the applique stitching around that. And as I said, if I'm using a darker colour, that will help that stand out nicely. But I did want to talk about this one that's up on the wall here, because I've gone ahead and the colours are quite dark, and so some of the shapes and things are getting a little bit lost in it. So what I've started doing, and I haven't done it all yet, is I have used a dark grey thread for my applique stitching. It's all blanket stitched, but I felt that it was just getting lost. Now I could use my trusty white gel pen to do a little bit of outlining, that's one option, or what I've actually started doing is doing a little line of a very pale grey stitching just around the outside of the applique, and that's just bringing it forward a little bit. So I'll do a little bit of that just so that you understand what I mean. So I've already done all the applique outlining that needs to be done, but I think around this little leg here, for example, would be quite helpful if it just was highlighted a little bit. So I've got my open toe foot on the machine so I can see where I'm going, and I've just got a straight stitch, and it's a little bit smaller than usual. Normally this machine's default size is 2.5, and I've put it down to 2. It could even go a touch less, but I'm just going to stitch like the outline stitch of the blanket stitch right next to that. So not on the applique, on the whatever it's applique to. So I'm just stitching, following the shape of the applique, but with that I've got a very pale grey thread in there this time, so that it should just stand out a little bit. We don't really want it to sort of jump at us, so if you have it close into the applique, then it does seem like an extra step, but sometimes it's quite nice to have just a few little different ways of doing things, and this would be a way you can highlight stitching in colours where it's just simply not showing, which in this case this little koala was just probably a little bit too incognito, I think. So I'm just going to go all the way around his whole leg and foot here, so that hopefully you can see that it does make a difference, and it's quite a good way of highlighting and outlining a shape. You could use something a little bit brighter perhaps, or different thread, but I just thought, seeing as I've used a darker grey, a pale grey would be a good answer. A tricky little foot shape here. And I'm nearly back to the beginning. So hopefully you can see that that's made a difference around that leg there. And I think, as I said, I've gone around here, but I'm going to do the branch, I'm going to go around the other shapes and things as well, and I think it'll just make it stand out a bit better. So, and the other thing I've done on this one with his face is I've actually drawn his face on with my Pigma pen, but the same thing, it's still needing a little bit of a highlight. So you could stitch around it, or you could use the white gel pen, because if you remember we did this with something before, and the white, it just helps highlight things. So I've already done this eye, I put a little dot on as a little sparkle, and I probably would just come around his little nose here. Or you could do exactly the same thing but with the stitching like I've just done on the applique. You could just colour it in initially with a black pen and then stitch around it. You can applique it and stitch around it. You can do it with a pen and the gel pen. There's so many options. Isn't life fun? So that was just a little suggestion of some different ways that you can do things to highlight shapes if they look like they're disappearing a little bit. And I think he's looking a whole lot better now that I've done a little bit more outlining. So that was it for part 11. That was our koala. There's 2 blocks, as I said, one going one way, one going the other. I'll finish mine off shortly. And I will see you again with part 12.